Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back. It is exactly 13 after 8 o'clock. That is, of course, South African time. We cross over to the UK and we'll be talking with Professor Jeff Halper. He is the director of the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions. So, undoubtedly, we're going to have quite a discussion because we're not only going to be talking house demolitions, we're probably talking about the annihilation of the Palestinian people, because that's what it seems to be at this current point in time. Professor Jeff Halper, very good morning to you. Welcome to the program. I understand you are in the UK because your flight back home to Israel has been cancelled. How do you feel being probably holed up indefinitely, a couple of days, maybe even a couple of weeks?
Well, there's worse places to be trapped than the UK. It is frustrating. I'm following the news. I'm in touch with my family, of course, and with friends and colleagues. But I'm trying to use the space here to sort of get my thoughts together and do writing. And of course, I'm the head of an organization called the One Democratic State Campaign. We've issued a statement that's on our website. And, I'm trying to be as relevant and contribute to my thoughts as much as I can, being far away.
Okay, we'll get to the One Democratic campaign in a little while, because last week, before this current situation that the global community finds itself in, it's not only the Palestinians and the Israelis that are going through the horrors of what is playing out right now from both sides, obviously, but the impact is going to and is being felt all around the world. Even us here on the tip of the African continent are going to feel the repercussions at some point or the other. When I spoke with Abir Zayad last week or the week before, I asked her about the two-state solution, which was on the table a while ago. And I also asked her about the one-state solution. And I think, in frustration of, years and years and years of oppression of the Palestinian people, she said at this point in time, I don't think any of those solutions will be workable for us as Palestinian people. We need to go back to the drawing board. We need to go to the agreements that were drawn up in 1967. Your thoughts?
This is a very, very complex struggle. And let me say two things quickly. First of all, in a bigger context, the whole international system that we live in, of international relations, is transactional. It's like a business. It's based on deals. It's based on short-term, what can I get out of this? My interest, your interest. And so it's only done between parties that have something to give to each other. The Palestinians are completely excluded from that system. They're not a political player. They have no oil. They have no particular resources. They have no strategic position geographically in the world. They have no resources that really would get them into like the casino. You see? And so, in a way, the Palestinians can think and think and think about what's the best way and so on, but basically they're not actors. And our role as civil society, we're in a very difficult position, because our role is not only to support the Palestinians, but to work with them in terms of what is a really a just political resolution for them. But then the question is, how do you get this into the arena, into the political arena? Because governments won't listen to us. We're not really players. And so we're looking, actually, our inspiration comes from South Africa, because in some ways you were in a similar position. Of course, you have diamonds, you had resources, but nevertheless, it was the ANC that managed to mobilize the international civil society, not governments, in support of you. And by unleashing an anti-apartheid movement, you created a global movement that was able to counter the power of governments and move governments. Because unfortunately, we need governments to resolve this. And so the Palestinians, I think, have to find a political, they have to come behind a political settlement. I think it has to be one state. It can't be two states. You can't go back to 67 because Zionism is a settler colonial movement. It's not ready for compromise geographically. The two states doesn't make any sense. The whole point of Zionism is to take over and Judaize the entire country of Palestine, from the Mediterranean to the Jordan River, not 78% of it. And so if you understand that, and the backing that Israel has from the international community, you realize that you have to attack the essence of Zionism, which is settler colonialism. You have to formulate a political program that I think has to be one state, because that's the only, you have to decolonize Zionism and then create the one apartheid state, take from the one apartheid state that Israel has created, make that, decolonize it, and make that into a democratic state for everyone. That's what you have to do. So once you get behind a political program, then I believe the Palestinians are able to mobilize the international grassroots the way the ANC did. Because I think already today, Palestine has become an issue internationally at the level of the anti-apartheid struggle. So they have the resources, they have the people, but they have to get behind a political program and mobilize, because it has to be led by them. It's their struggle. And unfortunately, they're fragmented. There's no PLO now for 30 years. They have a collaborationist Palestinian Authority. They have a Hamas that is great at resistance, but has no real political program. And they're really in a difficult position, because of that.
Okay, let's go back to a few of the comments you made regarding that Palestine have no resources, they don't have any oil, they don't have the right strategy, etc., etc. Why is it then, because no resources, why is the Israelis or the Zionists so hell-bent of this colonialism in that part of the world? Why is America backing them to the hilt? Why is the Western nations behind the Zionists and this entire movement, which you and I know is an outright apartheid movement against defenseless Palestinians?
For the same reasons I just said, the transactionalism, justice, human rights, the freedoms of people.
Let me come in here, Professor, let me come in here. Transactional. What can the Zionists or the Palestinian people, what can they use as transactional leverage when they have no resources?
They can use your audience. What did the ANC do? The ANC sent some of its best people abroad. They mobilized churches, they mobilized religious communities, they mobilized trade unions, they mobilized political organizations, students, universities. Everyone was involved. Everyone of my age was involved in the anti-apartheid movement. We were, in other words, the peoples of the world. Look, the transactional thing I'm talking about with governments eliminates all that. They don't care about Zionism. They don't support Zionism. They support Israel, and I wrote a book about this called War Against the People, because it has a huge resource, and that is its military security policing technologies that it exports. Israel is great at population control because of its history of controlling the Palestinians all these years. It has the right technologies. You see, it has the right technologies of repression, weapons, strategies of control, and Israel has become the enforcer of global capitalism. You find Israel in repressive regimes all over. Why does Saudi Arabia want to make peace with Israel? Because they support Zionism? Because they need those weapons of repression against their own people and and bigger weapons against Iran. So that's the way the world works. And in that point of view, the only resource the Palestinians have that they can mobilize is us, is the international. Now, the peoples of the world aren't transactional. The peoples of the world, why do they support the Palestinians? Governments support Israel. The peoples of the world more and more support Palestine. And like I said, it's become at the level of the anti-apartheid movement. Why? Because the peoples do care about human rights and dignity and freedoms of people and justice. I mean, there's religious communities, there's political communities, that on the left especially, that have those kinds of values. We have values. We care about people. We're going out. There was a big demonstration in London yesterday in support of the Palestinian people in Gaza. The people care, governments don't. So the only thing that's going to get the Palestinians in the game politically, give them some clout, is if they can mobilize the billions, and they can, the billions of people in the world. And then those people will begin to change their government's policies, because governments do look over their shoulder to see, are they having support? Governments, especially in Europe and North America, want to be reelected. Other governments don't want to be reelected necessarily, but they are sensitive to public opinion. And public opinion is for the Palestinians, but the only way to mobilize it is, again, to come behind a political program.
Okay, point taken. Gosh, it's all about geopolitics, isn't it? Even the Muslim neighbors of the Palestinians are not supporting them because it doesn't suit their current agenda, does it? Let's move on then, and let's look at the current situation playing out. It seems as if the Israelis were taken by surprise with this current attack. And obviously, we do know that there's absolutely mayhem in that part of the world. Sadly, the way that the Israelis are retaliating is that they've cut off all the most essential, basic human rights supplies to the Palestinian people. Water, electricity, food can't get into the Gaza. And I'm also wondering, there are aid agencies all around the world, very especially here in South Africa. Gift of the Givers and other such agencies are on a huge collection drive to try and get funds through to the Palestinian people. And I am thinking that the Israelis are not going to allow that aid to get through. Where do we stand with the situation currently?
That's true. Except there's one border they don't control, and that's the border with Egypt. Where is Egypt in all of this? Egypt tries to play a broker role here and there, but Egypt, I think there's a small corridor for certain humanitarian cases into Egypt, but Egypt could stand up and say to Israel, no. Israel is so concerned about normalization with the Arab world. Israel cannot succeed in that region if it's isolated, if it continues to be in conflict. It needs that. So the Arab world has some clout over Israel, it has some leverage. Egypt could say to Israel, if you don't allow us to bring safely humanitarian aid into Gaza, we're going to cut relations. And the other Arab countries could follow suit. I can't answer the question why they don't do that, but that doesn't let Israel off the hook. Israel is doing, this is genocidal, what Israel is doing in Gaza. But it has the power to do it. And again, it has the backing of the international community. And the international community is so cynical that it's we all know the narrative is that Israel is the peaceful democracy and it's the Palestinians who are the terrorists. So within that, that's part of our struggle as well. And I think we've broken that. I think the peoples of the world do not accept that. That's the media, that's governments and so on, mainstream media. But I think that's getting weak. So again, Israel is weak on that. But as long as they have American aircraft carriers and European aid and support, I'm sure there's counter pressures on Israel, to conform. And that's the problem. The Palestinians do not have the backing of the Arab states.
We've just also heard via mainstream media, obviously, this was in last night's news, that the European Commission is putting its full development portfolio under review worth a
Yeah.
total of 691 million euros.
Mhm.
As far as their aid to Palestine is concerned, that's another blow to the Palestinians, is it not?
Germany is doing the same thing.
Yep. Uh,
Yes, the
so,
governments are not our friends, and we have to
as
sit
you've
down.
said,
And I think you in South Africa could really help us. How do a people mobilize, support, and somehow break through and become political actors able to deal with how do they shame governments? How do we pressure governments? How do we do things like the dramatic attack that Hamas did that simply changes? I mean, Hamas did change the political situation. We're not at the same place we are. So there are ways of breaking through. Not always good ways, but there are ways of breaking through. We have to be strategic. And the problem is, of course, that Israel and the international community have so fragmented the Palestinians. They're all over without communication, without a hub of the PLO that the PLO used to be. There's no more PLO, and again, they've got this Palestinian Authority on their heads. So even if Palestinians could, and they're capable of formulating a real strategy and mobilizing us, it's very hard for them to get behind a political plan because there's no way for them to even communicate with each other. I mean, they're in a very, very difficult situation.
okay, Professor, I'm very pleased to tell you, lots of people watching this interview. So we're going to try and get in as much as we possibly can. A couple of questions, and then we also have to touch on the issue around Saudi Arabia wanting to normalize their relationship with Israel. I think that probably is going to be put, I hope, on the back burner for now. What is the situation as far as, Lebanon is concerned? We understand Israel is going to strike at the Lebanese border, but so many more questions. Let's just get the questions from our viewers and then we can proceed with the interview. Let's go to question number 1, and it is from Harry Kachotos. He says, why don't you just celebrate the slaughter of Israelis, then make yourself busy having a skewed conversation? Harry, what can I say? I don't think you see the big picture, but I'll let Professor respond to that.
Look, there's different layers to this. We can't ignore the human cost on the Palestinian side, of course. I mean, this is an ongoing genocidal campaign of Israel against Gaza, not from last Saturday, for years and years. On the other hand, resistance has its rules. I mean, the ANC, if I go back to the ANC, they had their rules. I mean, there were atrocities that happened, but the ANC was very disciplined about that. I think the ANC understood that resistance has to be tied to liberation. And it's a political struggle. It's not against people. I don't think the fight was against white people per se. Hamas has always said, it's in their charter, this is not a war against Jews. This is a political war against the state of Israel. So that's all important. And they were brilliant in terms of the breakthrough. It was well planned. They succeeded. But then it turned into a massacre. It did. And that's where you really have to be critical of Hamas. You have to try. It's, in the middle of a conflict, it's hard to be nuanced. It's hard to be critical of a party that in which you're supporting their political struggle. And they've done something important. Oh, the only thing they can do almost, that's their resource, is violently break through and change the situation. That was important. That's a success. But why they had to then turn this into a massacre, that became counterproductive because they destroyed all the strategic advantage they had. The world was looking with wonder at this breaking of Israeli invincibility. And then you go out and slaughter 260 kids in a music concert. In other words, if there was enough thought given into how do we mobilize our missiles? How do we break through the fence? How do we get into Israel? It was well coordinated, well thought out. Weren't there instructions for the fighters, the Hamas fighters, to say, look, take hostages. Go to that festival and take 260 hostages. That's what we need. We want to get our political prisoners out. We want to pressure Israel. That's our, that's the only, those are the only things we have left.
With due respect, Professor.
People, so I think, right. Just one half a sentence. I think it is proper that we condemn that action and the Palestinian resistance cannot be based on that's going to destroy, and that gives Israel all the justification to do what it's doing. So it became counterproductive, and from that point of view, we have to condemn that part of the Hamas operation, in my view.
But then the world has been silent over these many years about all of the killings of innocent women and children, Palestinian women and children. I've seen so many pictures, up until today, fathers carrying their babies, their dead babies, their dead children, with the retaliatory attacks by Israel. I'm not necessarily saying an eye for an eye, but what I am saying is that when a few lives have been lost in Israel, the whole world is up in arms. But what about the numerous lives that have been lost over the past so many years by the Israelis? Hold that thought. Let's just take a whole host of other questions. Let's ask our controller to start scrolling it on screen so that I can read them out to you, Professor. Let's see, which one do we have here? Just trying to get the question.
I don't have a pen. I don't have a pen to write.
No, don't worry. Okay, what they're saying, someone by the name of D. Curtin is saying, instead of pointing the finger at Israel, the Palestinians should reject the Hamas. Once they do that, then yes, let the aid in. Until then, no. They started this again. Guys, wake up. These people have been under siege for the past 75 years. Their land has been stolen from them. They are in a virtual open air prison. So please, good people, wake up and see the situation for what it really is. It's not a black and white issue. It's about genocide. It's about ethnic cleansing. I've responded to that statement. Professor, if you'd like to go ahead, please.
Well, it's the same thing. I mean, that we've been saying. There's a part of part of the battle we're in is this battle of narratives, and the Palestinians have a very powerful narrative, which resonates with the South African struggle, which is the closest form of settler colonialism to what we have in Palestine, Israel, I think. And that is that, justice is on our side. You're facing a settler colonial power that's trying to take over. It's genocidal. It's displacing people. It's killing people daily. All that. So that's in a way that's our appeal to the justice-driven international people, not the governments. That's our and Hamas. I don't agree with its political program, but it has a political program which is legitimate. But there has to be discipline. If the problem is that now Hamas is being seen as the Palestinian people. So there's a tremendous responsibility of every resistance group. If you represent your people, so if you break out and you begin to do atrocities, it's not fair. Why should you blame the victim? I mean, that's what you're saying, and that's true.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But at the same time, it's counterproductive to your liberation struggle. Okay. It's counterproductive politically because you're playing in exactly those narratives of people saying, you see, how could Israel live with Palestinians? Look at the way they are. So that's why you've got to be smart. You've got to be strategic in your thinking. And I think there are many Palestinians that I'm in touch with my Palestinian comrades. There was a sense of an ecstatic enthusiasm at the beginning, and it is important, but in a way, they ruined it. in the sense that they made it easy for Israel international community to condemn them because of those acts.
And let me just add, Professor, as we're speaking, there are lots of messages via Facebook. I would say that half of them are pro-Palestine and the other half from the Western world, obviously. The Western narrative, excuse me for using that terminology, but that's the only way I can think of, suggesting the Western narrative is now calling the Palestinians terrorists.
That's right.
And I mean, goodness me, these people, all they're doing is fighting for their freedom.
That's right.
How do we move forward on this situation? How do the Palestinians move forward? I understand that Saudi Arabia has put their talks on hold regarding normalizing their relations with Israel. How strategic is that move as far as Saudi Arabia is concerned? They haven't said anything else, but that does show a form of support, a very veiled form of support for this current situation by the Palestinians or by Hamas.
I don't think so. I think it shows. I don't think so. I think it simply shows that that they don't want to be embarrassed. You know, governments have to play this role. They're transactional. I mean, that's the base. But, the United States has to talk about, our foreign policy is based on human rights. Look, we're supporting the freedom fighters of the Ukraine. Saudi Arabia, that was called by the United States, by Biden a couple of years ago, a pariah state. You see the transactionalism? Yesterday's a pariah state. Today, they're giving Saudi Arabia nuclear weapons. So there are no commitments among governments. This is all cynical playing for them. And so they can't do everything. They're playing the PR game. It's as superficial as that. The Palestinians have the support of the Arab world, the peoples, certainly. They do not have the support of the governments for these transactional military security-based reasons, geopolitics and so on. And that's why, again, it's so important that the Palestinians not only formulate a political program that they don't have today, the Palestinian people, but at the same time, again, that they conduct their resistance. They conduct their resistance in a way that doesn't expose them to these kind of criticisms, because that in the end is what defeats you. So the resistance has to be tied to the liberation goals. Hamas could have gone in this. It could have been a great operation. They could have gone, and you know what? You can attack and fight Israeli soldiers. That's not an issue. Breaking out, you're faced with soldiers. Peoples under oppression have the right to armed struggle. You can attack military targets. Israel doesn't make a distinction. From them, the soldiers are just like everybody else. That's not true. You can attack the soldiers. You could take hostages. You could have done everything that Hamas could have done in that operation, and then we would have been celebrating, and Israel would have, and Saudi Arabia would have been in an impossible situation because the oppressed are rising up. But it didn't all work out that way, and that's why we're getting into this conversation about. That's how you can be pro-Israel. Because of so I look, what I'm saying is you need discipline, but it's not really fair for me, because let me just say this: the Palestinians are so controlled and so fragmented and so not in control of territory or their political leadership or anything, that it's very hard. You can say you should be disciplined and so on, but that's very hard to do. So we have to cut them a lot of slack. But nevertheless, there has to be that realization that your only ally is the international civil society, which includes the Western civil society. And you've got to play that game to mobilize them. You can't do things that violate their own sense of values.
Okay, we do need to wrap up. I'm going to get in one final question. I do need to tell you that social media is going absolutely crazy with this discussion right now. And from what I see going up and down on Facebook, it seems that the majority of white people, and I'm saying this under correction because I go by the names that are popping up, they sound like Western names, obviously, are slamming the Palestinian situation, slamming the Palestinians and saying that the Palestinians got what they deserved. And then from what I pick up from black people, it seems as if they're saying, Viva Palestine, freedom for Palestine. So you, as you rightly say, you're going, depending who you are and what type of narrative you've been fed over the years, you are going to reject or respond favorably to this situation currently, either for or against the Palestinian people. My final question then, that was my comment. My final question then is, it seems as if there was a report suggesting that Iran had helped Hamas prepare for this attack. Do you think if it is in fact proven, if that is in fact the truth, someone is suggesting that there could possibly be a breakout of a war in the Middle East?
Let me just respond to your first question first, because I want to be sure I get this in before we end. You have to support the Palestinian struggle for liberation. There's no two sides here. There aren't two sides. You know, settler colonialism is not legitimate. Coming in and taking over another people's country is not legitimate. It cannot be supported. The idea that the Palestinians have always promoted politically, whether it's two-state or one-state or anything else, has been inclusive. They haven't. They understand they have to live with the Israelis, but they're calling for justice and liberation of their own. And you have to support the Palestinian cause, in my view. And we're going into the worst part of this war, this mini war now, and that's what we really have to focus on. Israel is beginning the genocidal phase of this war. I mean, they've closed 2 million people into an area, a dense area, cut off all food, electricity, fuel, supplies, and so on. This is genocide. This is the definition of genocide. And this is where we have to really focus. And there's no two sides here. Israel has to be condemned, absolutely, and especially by white people in the north, in the global north, and especially by Jews. This goes against everything that Jewish religion, Jewish tradition means. This is a Jewish Israeli genocide against Palestinians, and that's what we have to mobilize around in the next few weeks, because this is what's really happened. And then, of course, there's always a possibility of a wider regional war, Iran involved and so on. But I don't think it's going to happen because of the same transactionalism. You've got ideologies, Iran and all, but at the same time, Iran is supported by Russia, and Russia's in connection with China, and China has relations with there's so many transactional relationships that governments have that there is a form of control. And I don't think the international government community is going to allow a wider conflict to emerge here, especially, if it could also threaten the Arab countries. If there's a war with Iran begins to come in, it might not be limited to Israel. It could spread to, a war with Saudi Arabia. So I don't see that happening. But I think we have to really focus again on this issue of genocide that the Palestinians are living today. And we all have to mobilize and keep that at the center focus and use that term.
And of course, it has been so for the Palestinian people for the past 75 years. They have been living under apartheid rule. We're going to have to leave it there. I thoroughly enjoyed talking with you, and I do hope that we will have another talk sometime soon. God bless, stay safe, and assalamu alaikum to you.
Thanks for having me on.
It is exactly 8:47. My word, I didn't realize that we got carried away with this interview, but I think it was a very, very important discussion to be had. And of course, that's where you have it. Professor Jeff Halper, he's the director of the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions. We're going to take an ad break, and then we will see if we can speak with the ambassador to South Africa, the Palestinian ambassador, Hanan Jarar.